Дорогие друзья, уважаемый господин президент,
dear friends, dear Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to welcome our guest, the President of the Algerian Republic, and thank him for taking the time to come to our event today. Mr. President, thank you very much. Dear Mr. President, I am also addressing our other foreign guests. Of course, my speech will be primarily devoted to the development of Russia. Our plans in a variety of areas, but I proceed from the fact that this will be of some interest to you, because many of you are either already working in our country, or going to work. And I hope you care about our assessment of how things are going and what we are going to do in the near future to understand whether it is worth dealing with us. I hope that Mr. President will also be interested. I apologize if this will be addressed exclusively to the Russian audience in some places. Nevertheless, what we are doing in our economy at the moment, in my opinion, can be applied in other countries as well. And this will only strengthen the possibilities of our interaction. So, once again I would like to welcome all participants and guests of the 26th International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. Speaking from this rostrum last year, I outlined my vision of the challenges that Russia, and practically the whole world, faced, and then dwelt in detail on our actions designed to ensure the confident, long-term, sovereign development of the country. Let me remind you that it was the second quarter of last year that became the most difficult for our economy, for domestic business, when circumstances, the usual order of trade, settlements, logistics were rapidly changing, when in fact the entire fabric of business and economic life was being reshaped. Today, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends, we can confidently say that the strategy chosen then by both the state and business in Russia has worked. Positive macroeconomic trends are gaining momentum and strength. In April of this year, the gross domestic product grew by 3.3% in annual terms, and by the end of the year it will add more than 1%. So, in any case, the IMF believes 0.7%. But, in my opinion, I agree with those of our experts who believe that the growth will still be more, somewhere up to 1.5%. And maybe even 2%. This will allow our country to retain its place among the leading economies of the world. In April, there was an increase in industry and retail trade. Moreover, the volume of output in the manufacturing industries in January to April exceeded last year's values by 2.9%. And let me remind you here that this particular sphere was under the strongest blow due to the rupture of cooperative ties and chains. What allowed us to provide the results I just mentioned? After all, a year ago, the mood, including in our business circles, was very, very wary. And, to be honest, few people predicted how events would develop. In such conditions, it was fundamentally important to give business a foothold, strengthen confidence in the policy, emphasize the inviolability of fundamental market institutions, freedom of entrepreneurship and guarantees of property protection. That is why, speaking at the forum last year, he formulated our value-based approaches to the development of the economy in new conditions. And for the long term, I want to say that what was said last year, we understand that what I said is the result of our collective work, both the government and the administration, the economic bloc of the government. Everything I said and everything that we prepared and then implemented. In the course of his practical activity, it worked. And here's why. What is it about? First, we have maintained a responsible, balanced fiscal and monetary policy. Their effective combination allowed us to reach the minimum values of unemployment, as well as inflation, which is now lower in Russia than in many Western countries, both in the Eurozone and in other regions, and is close to the historical minimum, 2.9%. Unemployment is 3.3%. It has never been so low in our history. What is important? The stable macroeconomic situation has become our competitive advantage, an effective factor of development. I must say that in the internal political discussion, in previous years, we used to hear a lot of reproaches against the government, the country's leadership. Why are we grabbing these macroeconomic indicators? We need to act boldly there. Practice has shown that we did not achieve this macroeconomic stability in vain. Using budgetary mechanisms and monetary instruments, we supported the demand in the economy, which means that we provided businesses and companies with work and at the same time did not allow prices to swing. We will continue to build our macroeconomic policy taking into account the real situation and focusing on target inflation, the way we did last year or during the pandemic, when demand in the economy fell, and to support it, we then increased the budget deficit to 3.8% of GDP. At the same time, for the next year, 2021, the budget was executed with a surplus, with a small, but nevertheless 0.4% of GDP. I would like to note that today our public finances are generally balanced. There is a current small federal budget deficit, but it is largely due to the postponement of planned expenditures to earlier dates or, as we say, to the left according to the schedule. We took this step consciously in order to increase the pace of implementation of state and regional programs. Naturally, additional funds were needed to strengthen defense and security, to purchase weapons. We are obliged to do this to protect the sovereignty of our country. I must say that in general, this justifies itself, including from an economic point of view. The dynamics of non-oil and gas revenues attracts attention. In January to May, they grew by 9.1%, which is significly higher than forecasts. At the same time, in May, the rate was plus 28.5%. I want to emphasize again, we are talking about budget revenues that are not related to oil and gas exports, and this is an important indicator that the real sector of our economy, its manufacturing enterprises, the manufacturing sector, trade and services are developing and gaining momentum. The Russian part of the audience probably remembers and knows, we have always said, when will we get off the oil and gas needle? Well, gradually this trend is gaining momentum, although I will also say about oil and gas, there are issues here that we should pay attention to. Second, the financial capabilities of the state allow us to keep a confident course towards ensuring social justice, reducing poverty and inequality. Such an emphasis has become an important factor in successfully overcoming the problems of the past year. We provide targeted support to the least well-off citizens. And if you look at this category of our people, their incomes, so their incomes have grown by about 30% over the year. In 2022, 1.7 million people left the poverty line, and the poverty level was below the double-digit mark 9.8%. Of course, every percentage matters here. This is quite obvious. And even the positive trends I mentioned, they may not be so significant in practical terms either, especially for those people who have just crossed this line. Their incomes are still too low, but I will say more about it. But the main thing is the trend, and the trend, of course, we will have to support and maintain. We are indexing pensions and social benefits, payments, increasing the minimum wage and the living wage at a faster pace relative to price growth. As a result, in the fourth quarter of last year, the real disposable incomes of citizens returned, thank God, to growth. Yes, it is also modest so far, but still it is a trend. This trend should intensify this year. In any case, I'm counting on it very much. It is obvious that this also supports demand, which means domestic production and the service sector, especially enterprises in the regions, locally, and, as a result, has a positive effect on regional finances, on regional budgets. Our third principle, which I spoke about a year ago, is the emphasis on the development of private initiative. Last year, we were predicted that, under the pressure of sanctions, Russia would return to a closed, administrative command economy. But, as you know, we have chosen the path of expanding the freedom of entrepreneurship, and practice has shown that we did absolutely the right thing. Life has proved it. A notable event and a powerful incentive for our business was the replacement of multinational corporations that left the Russian market. Unfortunately, they could not resist the powerful political pressure of foreign political elites. You know very well, we did not expel anyone from our market, from our economy. On the contrary, we offered to weigh all the pros and cons, to think carefully about our Russian partners and the possible consequences of such a step. Each of our partners had the right to choose. What is important here, many foreign brands have long been selling products that are fully manufactured at our facilities. In fact, these are Russian goods, only with foreign logos. So, their release with the departure of trademark owners will not stop. Only the logo will change. The profit from this business remains in our country. We will work for the new Russian owners, help them ensure the income of employees of their enterprises, as well as related parties and contractors. In short, if at first our entrepreneurs, I would say, were very worried about the departure of Western companies, now they occupy vacant production facilities and sites in shopping centers. Some small, so-called niche brands that used to sell clothes, shoes, and other goods through social networks are now opening their own stores. I have already said this at one of the events in Moscow. In this sector of the economy, foreigners have left for the most part, vacated up to 2 million square meters of retail space and a niche for 2 trillion rubles. Well, fine. Almost everything is already occupied by our entrepreneurs. Over the past year alone, Russian manufacturers have submitted more than 90,000 applications for trademark registration. In addition to clothes and shoes, it is mainly software, household chemicals, perfumes, cosmetics, and so on. I think I will not reveal a secret if I say that in the course of communication with representatives of domestic business circles, requests are increasingly being made not to let and wandering and foreign companies back. You know, the same thing happened in the field of agriculture after 2014, when our domestic agricultural enterprises began to gain momentum. At all meetings with agricultural workers, there was the same question: let our competitors go back or not? To the question, when to start? Answer: never, don't let them in at all, we'll do everything. I must be honest, our agricultural producers are doing it. The growth of agricultural production over the past year was more than 10%. And for all commodity items in this sector, we are actually covering our needs and actively working for export. But nevertheless, I will say, if foreign manufacturers want to come back again, to come to our market, and we hear such conversations more and more often, we do not close the doors for anyone. Of course, no one is afraid of competition. It is known to be the engine of progress and trade. We will create the necessary conditions for them to work in Russia. But the peculiarities of the behavior of some of these partners for the future, of course, we will take into account for ourselves and, of course, we will always put the interests of our domestic business at the forefront. By the way, those who have stayed with us, are working and are going to work, from foreign companies, we also consider them domestic manufacturers and we will treat them the same as our own. For all companies of this kind, the Agency for Strategic Initiatives has launched a special annual competition where the best growing brands of Russia will be celebrated. The results of the first competition will be announced soon, at the end of June. Its program covers more than 10 nominations. More than 5,000 applications from all over the country have already been accepted. I am sure that winning and participating in this competition will be a good challenge and help for our entrepreneurs to strengthen their positions in the market and increase investments in new capacities and jobs. Therefore, I urge the heads of the regions, please provide assistance to developing brands, now. They especially need such support at the regional level. I would like to note that over the past year, Russian companies' investments in fixed assets have increased in real terms. The same pattern is observed in January to March of this year, and this, I emphasize, taking into account the higher base of last year, when at the same time investments showed double-digit growth rates. Domestic banks support high investment activity. Their capital base has been tested for strength. For comparison, in 2022, the volume of lending to legal entities increased by 14.3%, and for citizens 9.5%. And the growth rate of loans to so-called unquote lawyers unquote, as they say in the professional environment, to legal entities, in April of this year was already 17.1%, and to unquote physicists unquote, that is, individuals, 12.9% growth. These are still good indicators. By the way, mortgages are also growing at a faster pace, 18% plus. An important factor in the growth of investment activity was the removal of digital restrictions, the rapid development of the transport, logistics network, and other infrastructure. And this is our fourth principle, confirmed last year and outlined last year as a principle. A systematic, consistent policy in this direction gives results. the volume of construction work has been growing for 5 years in a row, and last year is no exception. On the contrary, now such dynamics are increasing and continuing. In 2022, the volume of construction work increased by 5.2%. In January to April of this year, by more than 7%, 7.4%. We will continue to build and update infrastructure facilities, roads and railways, overpasses, bridges. We will continue to expand bottlenecks. Of course, we also have enough of them. Increasing the capabilities of seaports will be the focus of our attention, border checkpoints. We will pay special attention to the North-South corridor. We plan to double the volume of export traffic on this route by 2025. And triple it by 2030. In May, as many people know, we concluded an agreement with our Iranian partners on the construction of the missing railway section on Iranian territory. We are also dredging on the Volga-Caspian Canal. Already this year it will be able to receive vessels with a draft of 4.5 meters. As for the eastern direction, by 2025 its export cargo traffic should increase by a third, and by 2030 add another 100 million tons to the level of 2022. The key event here, of course, is the increase in the carrying capacity of the Baikal system, the Barma and Transsib. Already this year it should add 15 million tons, grow to 173 million tons. I would like to take this opportunity to note the successful work of the government and Russian railways, which were able to promptly increase the export of containers from the Far East. As a result, it was possible to eliminate congestion and reduce the workload of the Far Eastern terminals, in general. Simplify the supply of goods and components from Asian countries. I will add that in the next 5 years we will significantly upgrade the merchant fleet. The Ministry of Industry and Trade has already made changes to the large-scale shipbuilding program. To implement it, we will attract funds from the National Welfare Fund. I would like to note that within the framework of this program alone, at least 260 vessels are planned to be built at Russian shipyards in 2023 to 2027. In addition, we will continue the construction of the icebreaker fleet. Such vessels are necessary for the Northern Sea route, which is actively developing. Last year, 34 million tons of cargo passed through it. We expect that in the next year, 2024, the volume of such traffic will multiply, which requires the same advanced development of the railway and other infrastructure of the Murmansk transport hub and other Arctic ports. In this regard, I would like to note the work we are doing on the comprehensive development of regional infrastructure, increasing the connectivity of our territories. So, last year more than 20,000 kilometers of regional highways were repaired. 1,200 kilometers were built and reconstructed. All of this, dear colleagues, friends, record figures, record volumes, and I want to thank our builders, engineers, designers, workers for their responsible, productive work. I hope that this year we will not only keep this bar, but also raise it even higher. We have everything for this. Everything is made up. I hope that it will be as we plan. Modern communication and telecommunications lines are being developed. Last year, more than 3,000 kilometers of them were built. The plan for the current year is more than 9,000 1,000 kilometers, 3 times more. Let me remind you of the task set. By 2030, it is necessary to provide high-quality communications and internet access to all settlements of the country where 100 to 500 people live. I would like to emphasize that this is not only about improving the quality of people's lives. The development of regional infrastructure creates new business opportunities, including in the tourism sector. By the way, last year domestic tourism, the domestic tourist flow has grown noticeably. According to Росстат, in 2022, the number of Russian tourists in collective accommodation facilities increased by 16.7%. This is in absolute terms almost 10 million people. It is necessary to dynamically develop high-quality infrastructure for recreation in our country, and to focus here not on the current figures, but on the fact that the tourist flow will continue to increase. In this regard, I propose to expand the program of preferential lending to hotel projects, to focus on supporting the most popular segment. These are 3 or 4 and quat stars and quat. As you know, I also consider it necessary to include in this program the construction of year-round amusements parks, water parks and ski resorts. I know that businesses are planning or already implementing such projects in the Crimea, the Far East, Siberia, the Caucasus, the south and central part of Russia. Of course, we will support these projects and more. Now outdoor recreation is actively developing in modular, non-capital construction hotels, cottages, so-called glamping. Last year we allocated 4.2 billion rubles to support the construction of modular hotels, covered 174 projects in 20 regions of the country. However, the demand, as life shows, is much higher. Moreover, investment projects have been worked out, there are land plots, infrastructure lines have been brought in. I propose to allocate an additional 11 billion rubles in the next 2 years to support the construction of modular hotels. This will make it possible to implement another 470 projects of this kind. Almost 9,000 routes. This means that more people will be able to get acquainted with the unique nature, historical and cultural heritage of our country. The development of transport corridors and logistics capabilities of Russia allows our business to strengthen foreign trade and cooperation ties, primarily with the countries of the Eurosec, Asia, the Middle East and Africa, Latin America. The course towards the openness of the economy is, of course, our 5th most important principle. Despite all the difficulties of the past year, we have not turned to the path of self-isolation. On the contrary, we have expanded contacts with reliable, responsible partners in countries and regions that today act as locomotives, drivers of the global economy. And I want to repeat, these are the markets of the future. Everyone understands this perfectly, with some such states, whose leaders often do not succumb to boorish external pressure, but are guided not by others, but by their own national interests. The volumes of our mutual trade have not even increased by some tens of %. But at times and now continue to grow further. And this is another proof that common sense, business energy, objective market laws work more strongly than the current political conjuncture. This suggests that the ugly, inherently neo-colonial international system has ceased to exist, and the multipolar world order, on the contrary, is strengthening. This is an inevitable process. In general, last year our commodity exports updated the record of a decade ago, amounted to $592 billion. Almost a third of this amount minus $188 billion came from non-primary non-energy exports. This figure is worth 6.4 million jobs and 2.2 trillion rubles of tax payments to the consolidated budget of the country. I would like to note that the supplies of the agro-industrial complex, which I mentioned at the very beginning, have reached a new maximum. It is more than $41 billion. For 10 years now, Russia has been consistently among the top 5 grain exporters. Since 2016, it has been the world's largest supplier of wheat, the number 1 in the world markets. There is reason to believe that this year our companies will take another step forward. They will rewrite and update the record for the export of this crop. At the same time, Russia will actively participate in ensuring global food security and provide assistance to countries, including African ones, that are experiencing food shortages. In general, in January to April, our foreign trade was in the black by $22.6 billion. This is for January to April, in fact, a little more than the first quarter. At the same time, for the whole of 2022, the current account surplus amounted to $233 billion. What I want to emphasize, this resource should work more actively for the development of the Russian economy, including the import of advanced equipment, technologies, components and materials. I ask the government and the Bank of Russia to submit concrete proposals on how to use the funds coming to our country from high exports to stimulate investment, expand investment in large, systemically significant projects in infrastructure, logistics, territorial development, and so on. In projects that will increase the opportunities of domestic business in the widest range, to increase its competitiveness, including in global markets. Of course, Russia has not only partners and friends in these markets, there are also detractors, let's put it bluntly. They are used to extracting super profits from their dominance and monopoly, including political monopoly, and simply do not want other countries of the world to have an alternative to their planes, ships, medicines, banking systems, technologies and other goods and services. But such market participants do not need competitors. That's why they are putting sticks in the wheels, trying to restrain new development centers, as they say now, trying to cancel them. However, such attempts only lead to the fact that Western countries cancel their own business reputation, and this is worth a lot. In my opinion, sometimes some figures forget about this. Russia, in turn, has been and will be involved in the global economy. We have already radically simplified the regulation of foreign trade, significantly reduced fines for violating currency legislation and, I draw your attention, completely removed them in case of external unfriendly actions. By the way, this moratorium will be extended for the next year, 2024. What else? At a recent meeting with representatives of the Business Association Delovaya Rossiya, colleagues directly raised the issue of amnesty in the currency sphere. I'll be honest, we don't use this approach very often. But now, when the violation of obligations by Western counterparties has become a common practice, I think it is right to meet business halfway in such an acute issue. Namely, I propose to declare an amnesty for business for forced currency violations committed during the moratorium period, and completely close this issue, so that later there would be no reason to hold the business accountable, as they say. Retroactively, further, we have introduced accelerated VAT refund on exports. Now it is 8 days instead of 3 months. Together with our foreign partners, we are preparing new mechanisms for cross-border settlements, including making it extremely easy for foreign companies to open a bank account in Russia. In this case, you will not even need a personal presence, of course. Subject to all the requirements of the so-called anti-washing legislation. I will also note the noticeable progress in the use of national currencies in foreign trade. This is a separate big topic. Today, about 90% of settlements with the countries of the Eurasian Economic Union are in rubles. More than 80% of settlements with China are in rubles and yuan. We are actively developing trade in national currencies with other countries as well. The priority is the nearest neighbors, as well as the BRICS and SCO countries. In short, we have a whole set of tools to support foreign economic activity, and in all sectors, industry, agriculture, and other sectors. The work of these tools is designed for a long time. We will extend it until 2030. At the same time, it is necessary to constantly increase tools, improve tools to support exporters, make them more convenient for business. Of course, he is now actively entering friendly, but still new markets with their own specifics. Of course, the state should take this into account and will do it. In particular, specific solutions are needed for the development of export insurance, as well as for the use of factoring, which will also support our manufacturers and suppliers. To promote domestic products through e-commerce platforms. Their audience and customer base is steadily growing both in our country and around the world, which means that even a small business can find its buyer. We have something to work on here. We are not the leaders here, but, by the way, we are not trailing either. But the prospects are very good, very good. I ask the government to launch a line of e-commerce support tools as soon as possible, as well as to constantly analyze their effectiveness, primarily for small and medium-sized businesses, in order to work together with business associations to improve it. I will add that we have examples of our own successful electronic platforms. We need to help them with access to large markets, such as China, India, the markets of our neighbors, such as Turkey and other countries. Moreover, the benefits are mutual. Our products will become more accessible to foreign markets, and Russian buyers will receive a wider selection of goods and services. Dear friends and colleagues, in the face of unprecedented challenges, Russia has not retreated from its principles of economic development. I have already started with this. Through the joint efforts of entrepreneurs, large, medium, small companies, with the active participation of the authorities, we have preserved the stability of our economy. Today it is absolutely obvious, as they say, a medical fact. Positions as the most important participant in the global market are also preserved. We have ensured the stable operation of entire branches of the real sector, labor collectives, many enterprises, and so on, supported the well-being of millions of Russian families. The key, strategic, systemic task both today and in the future is not simply to compensate for the decline in GDP or to replace foreign companies that have saved us from their presence in our market, and certainly not to wait out the supposedly temporary fluctuations in the global economy. I have already said, dear friends, and I want to repeat once again, changes in the world in all its spheres are cardinal, profound and irreversible. That's what is important. In these conditions, it is necessary to move only forward, which means that we need a proactive economic policy that can be built and implemented in close conjunction with representatives of the business community, with our entrepreneurs. In fact, we are talking about a transition to a qualitatively new level of development, a sovereign economy that not only reacts to market conditions and takes into account demand, but also forms this demand itself. Such an economy, it is often called the supply economy, involves a large-scale build-up of productive forces and the service sector, the widespread strengthening of the infrastructure network, the development of advanced technologies, the creation of new modern industrial capacities, and entire industries, including in areas where we have not yet proved ourselves properly, but the opportunities for this are scientific opportunities. Of course, we have creative potential. What is important for the implementation of such a model, the supply economy model, and what tasks do we need to solve now and in the near future? Today I have already spoken about record low unemployment in Russia, which, of course, can be rightfully proud of. However, this achievement has a downside to the coin. The representatives of the companies in this room, of course, understand what is being discussed. I'm talking about the difficulties associated with the selection of employees, with a shortage of personnel. Therefore, the first direction of development of the supply economy in the current conditions, of course, is employment and improvement of the employment structure. We have huge reserves here. We need to use them. And for this we need to retrain personnel, increase the economic activity of citizens so that people can realize themselves in new, growing, promising sectors. In every city, village and region there should be an opportunity to find work. I would like to draw the government's attention to the situation in regions with high unemployment, and in our country, despite the fact that it is at a historical minimum in the whole country, it still remains high in some regions. Here it is important to give more opportunities to people to get a new specialty, including in the field of information technology or other technical areas, competencies for working in the format of remote employment. We need to increase this area of work. Already next year, with federal support, at least 10 such projects should be launched in regions with limited budget resources. A good example of the creation of such educational spaces is, as an example, and School 21 and organized by ESPA. I cannot but welcome programs of this kind. Further, it is necessary to increase the focus of higher and secondary specialized educational institutions on results, that is, on the successful employment of graduates. In this regard, I think it's right to do two things, at least two. The first is to establish special key performance indicators for educational institutions. The main one is the quality of employment of graduates. Based on this approach, I propose to form ratings of educational institutions of vocational education. And secondly, I propose to prepare annually a 5-year forecast of the need for personnel at the level of the entire economy in order to take into account changing trends, new demands of the labor market and of course, are priorities in the development of economic sectors as flexibly as possible. Separately, I ask the government to prepare proposals for the development of such a tool as a student contract. Its meaning is that the employer sends an employee to study and improve their qualifications at their own expense, and the employee in turn receives a guarantee of employment for a more qualified workplace. Naturally, here, it is necessary to create incentives for business and use such a mechanism, including with the help of state support. I won't go into details now, but we understand what we are talking about. Qualitative changes in the labor market imply an increase in wages. It will probably sound strange what I am going to say now, but nevertheless I am sure that it is so. Now I want to say separately about such an important indicator as the minimum wage. The minimum wage. We continue to index it, and at a faster pace, to increase the separation of the minimum wage, from the subsistence minimum. From January 1, 2023, the minimum wage was increased by 6.3% to 16,242 rubles per month. From January 1, 2024, we will carry out another indexation by 18.5% at once. From January 1, 2023, there was 6.3% indexation, and from January 1, 2024, there will be 18.5%, which will be much higher both the inflation rate and the growth rate of wages in the country as a whole. The total increase in the minimum wage will have a positive impact on the incomes of almost 5 million people, to be more precise 4.8 million. And by 2030, the minimum wage should grow at least twice in nominal terms, which will be an additional incentive for wage growth in the country as a whole. What would I like to add here? What do I think is important to add here? We are expanding social support measures for citizens, especially families with children. Many of these payments depend on whether a person works or not. These payments are tied to the income of the family, to the income of a particular person. If such income increases even slightly, then social benefits are stopped or significantly reduced. This means that a person has no incentive to look for a new job, a higher salary. We have to change this situation. It should be profitable to work, and state support should serve as an aid, and additional income to the salary, and not its replacement. I think that you understand. Dear colleagues, in conditions of such low unemployment, this is an incentive for people to go to work. And of course, we need to look for such incentives and improve them. Therefore, I propose to pay child benefit for up to 1.5 years, as well as a single child benefit for the entire period of time for which they are assigned, regardless of whether the family income has increased or not. I also propose to support citizens who take care of disabled children. Today, they are also entitled to benefits only if they do not work, do not have any other source of income. Even if you want to earn extra money, you can't do this, then you will lose your allowance. It is necessary, of course, to remove these restrictions, namely, to keep the care allowance for part-time employment of such citizens. And so that there are no discrepancies here, it is necessary to fix the concept of part-time employment in the law. I ask the Parliament to adopt the relevant norms as soon as possible. The second direction of development of the supply economy is the expansion of entrepreneurial activity. Small and medium-sized businesses in Russia employ more than 28 million people. Since the beginning of 2022, the number of self-employed has doubled. We now have 7.6 million of them. It is necessary to support people who want to do business, take their first steps here, including within the framework of a social contract. Today he provides for the launch of his business, the maintenance of a personal subsidiary farm. I think it is right if the participant of the social contract will undergo additional training in entrepreneurial skills. On the basis of the My Business centers, of course, at the expense of the state. At one of the last meetings of our forum, I proposed launching an umbrella mechanism for lending to small and medium-sized businesses. We are talking about guarantees of the SME, corporation in cases where entrepreneurs do not have enough collateral to obtain a loan. Today, this mechanism operates in all regions. With its help, more than 39,000 loans worth over 350 billion rubles have been issued. I must say that this mechanism works well. Look at this. In 2022 compared to 2020, the number of loans with guarantees for manufacturing industries increased 7 times, and for entrepreneurs in the field of IT technologies 46 times. Of course, the demand for such a tool is even higher, especially in industries such as tourism, and information technology. Therefore, I propose to increase this resource, extend the mechanism of umbrella guarantees until 2030, and I ask the government to define target limits for increasing the volume of such lending. Anton Germanovich, Saluanov, I'm not naming these target limits. I'm asking you to work them out and approve them. But this is a real tool for the development of the economy as a whole. I also consider it necessary to expand the scope of this measure to include the so-called SME Plus category here. These are small enterprises that, despite the known difficulties, have grown in recent years and according to formal criteria, such as employment, revenue, can no longer apply for state support, but are in an important stage of growth, in an important phase of growth, and need resources. Special support measures are needed for such companies. I ask the government to work them out by the end of this year. And more. Now, companies that grow out of the status of small and medium-sized ones lose their rights to preferential tax regimes. The tax burden on them increases at the moment, and so on until they apply for benefits as part of the support of already large businesses. A situation arises, and for this hall, for this audience, I will not say anything new. Everyone understands perfectly well what it is about. A situation arises when there are few incentives to grow, to move to another weight category. It's just unprofitable. Therefore, companies are using various tricks to try to stay in the small business sector, in the SME sector, including resorting to business fragmentation in order to preserve these benefits. The tax service sees all this perfectly. I don't know, Mr. President, how it is in Algeria, but we have been doing this for many years. I think that people in this sense are the same everywhere and will always find a way out of the situation that the state draws if there are real growth restrictions. That's what I said. These are the realities of our life today. In this sense, there is no point in catching someone by the hand. The task is to support development, remove obstacles that prevent businesses from gaining strength, expanding, and creating new jobs. The best way here is to help, to create conditions for a smooth and easy transition to another category of business. I ask the government to submit proposals in this regard at the beginning of next year, including the launch of a preferential transitional tax regime. Another important measure to support entrepreneurship concerns the limitation of inspections and other control measures. Let me remind you that last year we established a moratorium on routine inspections of all Russian businesses, and then extended it for the current year, 2023, and for entrepreneurs whose activities do not involve high risks of harm. The moratorium is valid even longer, until 2030. As a result, 339,000 inspections were carried out across the country last year. This is 20% less than in COVID 2020, and almost 5 times less than in 2019. This is not a bad indicator, but there is I will also say this now. Firstly, I believe that if a business is not associated with high risks of harming citizens or the environment, then it should not be checked at all, neither in a planned manner, nor in an unplanned one. There are enough preventive measures. Mr. President, as a result of practical work in the economy with business, we come to such decisions. I apologize for speaking for a long time, but maybe you will also find something useful for your country here in our life, in our practice. Next year we will evaluate what I am proposing now, how it will work. Of course, I believe that it is enough to limit ourselves to preventive measures, and next year we will continue to work to reduce administrative pressure on entrepreneurs. I also ask you to step up work on such a tool as the transformation of the business climate. In fact, this is a systematic project to create a friendly, favorable environment for entrepreneurship in all regions of the country. Contacts with business associations have already been established here. It is with their submission that regulatory changes are made, and it is the business community that evaluates the effectiveness of the measures taken. This year, the roadmaps and in the field of industrial construction, exports, and corporate governance have been updated. I ask you to do similar work in the near future in urban planning, in high-tech business, including the use of artificial intelligence, as well as in tourism and in the field of intellectual property. Let me remind you, we used to use the World Bank ratings to assess business conditions in one area or another, and, by the way, we achieved good results in this. There is a sound grain, a good message, that stimulates competition, in such a rating. Of course, there is no need to abandon this idea. It is very important to have objective criteria in order, as they say, to evaluate your work and progress from the outside. Therefore, I ask the government, together with the business community, or business associations, the Agency for Strategic Initiatives, to develop a domestic model of target conditions for doing business at the national level, necessarily taking into account the best international experience, in order to implement this model step by step in practice in the country as a whole and in each individual region in particular. And of course, in the development of the business climate, it is impossible to ignore such sensitive issues for business as the improvement of law enforcement practice and the decriminalization of criminal legislation. I repeat, It is necessary to ensure clearer legal regulation of economic life in the country, including eliminating the so-called vague formulations in the regulatory framework and the so-called rubber articles, to minimize cases when investigations disrupt the work of enterprises, cause the collapse of labor collectives. We've been talking about this a lot already. I won't go into details now. I want the colleagues with whom we are discussing this from the business community to know that we are not leaving this topic. We will definitely work on it. A year ago, from this rostrum, I announced a number of initiatives in this area. Many of them have already become laws, and some are still being discussed in the government and parliament. I understand that it is not easy to find a compromise here. However, I really ask my colleagues not to delay and rather come to final decisions, to approvals. Today I would like to put forward a few more proposals based on the results of meetings with the Russian Union of Industrialists and entrepreneurs, as well as with Delovaya Russia. We are talking about the norms of criminal legislation that have lost their relevance or duplicate the Code of Administrative Offences. So, we have not changed the thresholds for large and especially large property damage for more than 10 years, which is not related to theft, as well as for violation of copyright and related rights. I would like to pay special attention to the latter, since now foreign companies themselves refuse to supply software and other services. I think it is right to raise these thresholds at least twice, and do the same for the economic composition of crimes where imprisonment is not applied. I mean, evading disclosure of information under securities legislation. And a separate topic, I just said that the number of business inspections has decreased. I made, as you noticed, a small reservation. Now I'll tell you what it is about. Entrepreneurs say that now, instead of the control of supervisory authorities, law enforcement officers began to come, and often there are no violations. But they are right there. They are already coming, picking at something there. Perhaps this is justified somewhere. Perhaps. But, in fact, what is going on? There is a substitution of concepts. We say, there will be no checks, but in practice it turns out that there will be, only it is called differently and other people come. Of course, this undermines business confidence in the reform of the control and supervisory sphere, affects the work of business. I want to emphasize that inspections, where they remain, should be carried out only by relevant departments. And I ask the government, together with the Prosecutor General's Office and the Ministry of Internal Affairs, to further consolidate this norm in legislation and strictly monitor its implementation. This is very important. Otherwise there is no point in our work. It is necessary to prescribe everything, to prescribe. As our famous comedian once said, it is necessary to work out the so-called legal technique more carefully so that every word is clear. Further, the business climate in Russia for both novice and mature businesses should be globally competitive. As he said in his address to the Federal Assembly, business in key industries and sectors, the management structures of our largest system-forming enterprises should work precisely in the Russian jurisdiction. Yes, of course. Every businessman has an unshakable right to dispose of profits and property at his discretion. For this, any business is launched. This is the main motive, the basis of entrepreneurial activity. Of course, there can be no doubt about it. But the situation when funds are earned in Russia, and then settle on foreign accounts, carries obvious and often unacceptable risks not only for the state, but also for the Russian business itself. Many of our businessmen were convinced of this by their own example when they saw, and were surprised to find that both accounts and assets were frozen in the West. But in fact, as we have said many times, it never occurred to anyone before that this was possible, in violation of all the norms of their own and international legislation. Robbery was simply closed, taken away, and they don't even explain why. They don't even want to talk. Surprisingly simple, some kind of medieval. But our people have an apt saying, where he was born, he came in handy there. Therefore, I have already said many times, addressing our business community, we need to focus, of course, on investing money here. Then they will be more reliable. And the profit will be greater. I have no doubt about that. These funds will actively work in the country, in the economy, in the social sphere for our citizens, and not only will all this bring considerable benefits to the country, reliability is higher. Higher reliability. Today, quite a lot of domestic assets are registered with foreign companies. Their owners are actually Russian citizens who want to return to Russian jurisdiction. We have launched 2 special administrative districts for them, in the Primorsky territory and in the Kaliningrad region. Here, companies can protect their assets, maintain the usual corporate governance system, and also take advantage of a number of tax preferences. I know that not everyone who would like to take advantage of this opportunity, and the reasons are different. Someone simply did not have time or could not get legal and accounting services abroad. However, there are also cases of direct unwillingness on the part of foreign partners to give out all this information, documents. This is sabotage. There is no other way to call it. They just don't want to release our assets. Entrepreneurs with our assets. I ask the government, in contact with the business community, to speed up the return of assets in key industries to Russian jurisdiction, including simplifying the procedure for the transfer of business to Russia and registration in special administrative regions. In cases where such a move is, figuratively speaking, blocked by a foreign party or is not provided for in their legislation at all. This also happens. This should be done before December of this year, and in the same period it is necessary to launch a mechanism for protecting the rights of Russian citizens and legal entities that own domestic companies, but through the so-called foreign layers. To put it simply, what is it about and what is the problem? Once someone transferred from one offshore to another, from another to a third, then some quasi-owners, beneficiaries appeared. There, they were also covered up by some offshore companies. To be honest, sometimes you look at all this, it becomes a pity for those who did it. They eventually got caught. Let's think together how to help. It would seem that these are the consequences of individual decisions. Their personal difficulties. But in the end, of course, we are talking about companies and enterprises that operate in Russia. Our citizens work here, at these enterprises, investments are made here. Therefore, for the owners of such a business, it is necessary to provide a clear place in the Russian legal field and, I will say it bluntly, to help. We will try to do this in dialogue and in contact with you, dear colleagues. The next key direction of the development of the supply economy is related to ensuring the growth of investments. it is necessary to increase their inflows into projects for the production of priority industrial products. Already this year, the volume of such investments should be at least 2 trillion rubles, and by 2030 it will increase fivefold, up to 10 trillion rubles. For this purpose, a whole set of instruments has been formed in recent years, including an agreement on the protection and promotion of capital investments, special investment contracts, an industry development fund, and an industrial mortgage has been launched. At the end of February, the so-called cluster investment platform began to operate. Its participants can get preferential loans at a rate lower than the central bank's key rate. The amount of one loan is up to 100 billion rubles. Such loans can be issued under the guarantee of Vladimir Bank. Subsidies are allocated for R&D, research and development work, according to modern technologies. The emphasis is placed on those that make it possible to deploy mass production within 3 years. Last year alone, more than 160 such projects were approved, including in the field of medium and low-tonnage chemistry, LNG and hydrogen energy. Of course, technological sovereignty does not mean its own production of all goods and services. This is impossible for any country in the world. And it is not necessary at all. We do not strive for this. It's about having your own solutions in critical areas. At the same time, it is necessary to build reliable cooperative chains and technological partnerships. Here we look forward to cooperation with colleagues from friendly countries, with partners in the Eurosec, BRICS, SCO, and other associations. Of course, we need to increase the financial base of private investment projects and make such resources more accessible to businesses. The Project Finance Factory is already operating. With its help, 26 projects are being implemented with a total cost of 1.8 trillion rubles. Among them are the construction of a mining and metallurgical plant in Transbaikalia, a coal port in Primorye, fertilizer plants in the northwest and far east, the construction and modernization of airports and energy facilities. 7 more projects worth 345 billion rubles have been approved. In short, these are the tools needed by the business in demand. I propose that these instruments, which I have just mentioned, aimed at lending to projects to strengthen Russia's technological sovereignty, should certainly be further improved and strengthened. The list of evaluation of such projects has already been approved by the government. We will also launch a VEB umbrella guarantee program for such projects in the amount of up to 200 billion rubles. According to the forecast, this will reduce the rate on investment loans by about 1.5 percentage points. The procedure is as follows. If the project passes the selection of the factory and the creditor banks, it automatically receives a guarantee from VEB, up to half the cost of the project. And of course, we have to unlock the great potential of the Russian stock market. At a recent meeting with Delovaya Rossiya, we agreed to launch bonds with the right to a share in the company's revenue. Obviously, the period of circulation of such bonds can be different, up to indefinite. I hope that the government and the central bank will promptly implement this idea. It is necessary to develop the attraction of equity capital. With the participation of VEB, we will launch a special tool that will allow banks to participate as shareholders of investment projects. At the same time, a significant part of the risks will be assumed by VEB again. At the initial stage, the possibilities of the equity funds program will amount to 200 billion rubles. But even this volume will unlock investments worth about 2 trillion rubles. There is no need to delay. The first projects should start this summer. As for the circulation of corporate shares in our market, as I said in the message, we support the placement of shares in a fast-growing high-tech business. Now, the government is working on the issue of tax benefits for both issuers and buyers of such securities. And in order to further support and saturate our stock market, a special decision has been made. It concerns the situation when foreign owners sell Russian assets. In this case, a part of the shares of companies whose owner changes should be transferred to the Russian stock exchange. And of course, it is important to create incentives for additional inflow of funds to our capital market. A serious source here is the long-term savings of citizens. There is nothing new here. Such projects should receive support, including within the framework of the voluntary pension savings insurance system, where the state guarantees a refund of 2,800,000 rubles. I repeat, we need to make sure that our citizens can invest money and earn money at home, inside the country, and we know those situations in which funds invested abroad were in limbo. What else is important? In Moscow or here in St. Petersburg, an investor can get not just a plot of land, but also connected communications, and even a full package of tax benefits and deductions. But this is in the capitals and in several other large regions. A number of subjects simply do not have such an opportunity because of modest budgets. Of course, such regions need help. In particular, it is necessary to continue the advanced development of infrastructure with the provision of support within the framework of the so-called infrastructure menu, and first of all to focus on regions with low budget security. In addition, it is necessary to ensure equal opportunities for regions to provide benefits for new projects. What is it about? I will try to explain. Now the subjects of the Federation, in order to stimulate the launch of new business initiatives, expansion or opening of production from scratch, can introduce an investment tax deduction. Last year we expanded the list of expenses for which it is provided. However, it cannot be said that the mechanism has been fully worked out. There are few projects where such a deduction is applied. Budgets of far from all regions can now and yield and in revenue for the sake of future revenues. It is necessary to increase the demand for investment tax deduction. I think it is right if we focus this tool on projects aimed at strengthening the technological sovereignty of our country, primarily in regions with small budget opportunities. I ask the government to work out this issue with the participation of the State Council Commission on Investments, as well as the business community, in order to restart the mechanism of investment tax deduction with updated parameters from next year. In particular, it is necessary to use long-term budget loans on preferential terms to support the regions in this area. I know that there are risks of overloading, recrediting of regions. All of this will need to be thought about. I repeat, the main thing here is to take into account the interests of business development and at the same time ensure the Balance of regional budgets. I would like to add that regional management teams play a leading role in creating a modern business environment. Today, according to tradition, I would like to mention the subjects of the Federation that have made the greatest progress in the national rating of the investment climate. In total, 60 regions have advanced in this list. I am pleased to name the Chechen Republic, Rostov, Saratov, Kostroma regions, Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug and the Trans-Baikal territory showed the best dynamics. I congratulate my colleagues and wish them further success. The next direction of the supply economy is to increase the efficiency of the real sector and the service sector, increase labor productivity in Russia by eliminating bottlenecks, eliminating losses, and implementing optimal solutions. All this is described by the term and careful production and Since 2019, we have been implementing the national project and labor productivity and about 5,000 enterprises participate in it. More than 88,000 employees have been trained in new modern methods. We see how this work gives results, including in the military-industrial complex. It allows you to quickly customize the production of weapons and military equipment. The introduction of the principles of careful, efficient production should gain momentum, not only in the basic sectors of the economy, but also in other sectors, in the social sphere. Here it is necessary to fully utilize the resource of the Federal Competence Center and expand its mandate. Another key area of the supply economy concerns active automation and the development of artificial intelligence technologies. In Russia, due to objective demographic processes, the supply on the labor market will be limited. In these conditions, it is extremely important for us to increase the pace of automation of mining, manufacturing, agriculture, transport and logistics, trade and many other areas. Russia has not only huge potential here, but also effective solutions of its own. Just the other day, as part of our forum, the launch of KAMAZ unmanned trucks on the Neva Federal Highway took place. Unmanned Yandex taxis are already operating on the streets of Moscow. These are good, but so far isolated examples, and we need the mass introduction of such technologies. Let me remind you that last November we discussed measures to stimulate the introduction and production of industrial robots in Russia. We agreed that the government will approve the relevant federal project by July 1st. I ask you to strictly maintain this deadline. Delay here is absolutely critical for our economy. The next important question is what is called data-based management and This approach should be applied almost everywhere in the transport and communication system, medicine, education, government authorities and so on. We need to actively implement and use these developments. Support the preparation of domestic software in the field of big data, launch projects in the field of artificial intelligence and, of course, strengthen information security, monitor data turnover, so that they do not harm national security and the interests of our citizens. My colleagues and I have already agreed on concrete actions in this regard. Unfortunately, there is also a lag here. You need to catch up with it and strictly adhere to the established plans in the future. We will hear the government's report on this direction in the near future. I would like to add that we regularly review the implementation of new technological solutions in the Russian economy and hold an annual conference dedicated to artificial intelligence. And starting this year, we are launching a new special platform, the Forum of Future Technologies, where advanced areas of technological development will be discussed on an annual basis. Companies, regions, research teams will present the developments, share their experience in mastering the latest solutions. The first forum will be held very soon, in July. Promising ideas in the field of computing and data transmission will be discussed. I invite everyone to take part in this. Technological changes are going very fast today, and for effective development it is no longer enough to automate individual production processes. You need to act on the scale of entire markets. Successful examples of such working platforms already exist in Russia. This is the Yandex platform in the taxi market. I have already mentioned this, and the automatic lending system in the savings bank, and the Ozone e-commerce platform. I repeat, we need to cover more and more industries and institutions, forming the techno-economy of the future, an economy with institutions operating on a qualitatively new technological basis. The platform principle of data-based management is being actively implemented in the daily activities of the Russian government and colleagues in the regions. In many areas of such work on the use of new principles of the digital state, we are among the undisputed world leaders, and this is a fact. We need to strengthen these positions and move on. Dear friends, the format of our communication does not allow us to touch on the entire block of topics that relate to the supply economy. I believe that I have already tired you. But in the end I just want to note that the detailed study of each of the directions is the task of the government of the Russian Federation. One of the key indicators that our approaches are being implemented correctly is the level of inflation. I have already said this. It is important for us to simultaneously achieve high rates of economic growth and maintain price dynamics near the target values of 4%. You know, the central bank is talking about possible inflation at the end of the year in the region of 5%. Restraining price growth today is not only the task of the Bank of Russia, but also an assessment of the quality of the work of the government of the Russian Federation to stimulate the growth of offers. I ask my colleagues to pay special attention to this. To do this, it is also important to increase the efficiency and return on public spending. The implementation of a policy aimed at developing the supply economy and improving the efficiency of budget expenditures are the priorities on the basis of which it is necessary to formulate the federal budget for the next 3 years, and we will discuss the implementation of the measures of the economy of the proposal in detail at the Strategic Development Council in July. In this regard, I would like to emphasize that a lot has been said today about the formation of this very supply economy. But where there is supply, there must necessarily be demand, which means that the expansion of Russia's economic opportunities and its potential should be directly linked to improving the well-being of our citizens. This is exactly the embodiment of economic growth. I want to finish with what I actually started with. Here I mean not only the preservation of low inflation and high employment. Of course, it is important to ensure the outstripping growth of citizens' incomes. The Russian economy should become an economy of high wages with new requirements for the system of vocational education, with an increase in labor productivity, including on the basis of automation and new management systems, with high-quality modern workplaces and working conditions. I know that many, at least some, believe that the high cost of Labor reduces the country's global competitiveness. It is obvious that such a view had certain grounds, but it is outdated or, one might say, outdated. It does not take into account modern realities, especially the trends of tomorrow. If we say that the future of any economy, including the Russian economy, is in high technologies, then it is impossible to achieve high-quality work in high technologies using low-skilled labor, and if it is highly skilled labor, then it must be paid. Only where work is adequately paid, professional, qualified personnel will work, really. High-quality products will be produced, demand will grow and its structure will change, which means that only their truly sovereign development, technological and economic leadership is possible. The state meets business halfway, helps in solving acute problems, including issues with logistics, orders, availability of working capital. And we have the right to count, dear colleagues, on reciprocal steps on the part of the owners of enterprises or companies, on the manifestation of social responsibility. We talk about this all the time. I will repeat what I said at the recent RSPP Congress and at a meeting with members of Delovaya Russia. It is the business that builds and implements long-term plans designed to strengthen the technological, industrial, and agrarian sovereignty of our country that should receive assistance at all levels of government, who does not siphon off funds, but invests in the development of their business in Russia, supports state investments in infrastructure, in the development of cities and territories, in environmental projects. I would like to emphasize once again that measures of state support for the economy, industries, and system-forming enterprises should be linked to an increase in employees' salaries, an improvement in their working conditions, and an expansion of social packages for staff. I ask the government to pay close attention to this. Today, Russia has a rich and very ambitious economic agenda. The difficulties and problems we face are an incentive for all of us, an incentive to increase the pace and quality of transformations, to achieve more in improving the quality of life, well-being and well-being of our citizens. Of course, we will strengthen our sovereignty in all areas. We are certainly open in this work to an equal partnership with all countries, with all those who, like Russia, value their national interests and are ready to determine their own future. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. Applause.